nature viewing, and we are privileged to gather on the traditional territory of the Kwakwaka'wakw. I ask if there are any amendments to the agenda, and if none, a motion to accept the agenda as presented. Seconded?
Second.
Okay. All right. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 3A, we have the March 7th official community plan hearing minutes. Does everybody else have the same thing as I have? Yeah, I do too. Oh, sorry, 4A. There's a hole punched through the 4. Okay. Apologies. Okay. Sorry, 4A, March 7th, 2022 official community plan hearing minutes. Moved. Second for that. Anyone opposed? Or sorry, all those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you for that. And then the March 8, 2022 regular council meeting minutes. Seconder for that. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, next we have correspondence. Item 5A is a letter to Ministry of Transportation from Port Hardy. I've included it on the agenda to just ask council, do we want to write a letter as well, or a letter of support to Port Hardy, or receive and file? What's your pleasure? Okay, seconder for that. Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next, we have item 5B, Port McNeill RCMP activity report. Don't have the RCMP with us this evening, but receive and file is in order. Yeah. Seconder for that. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Moving on to item 5C, we have North Island Community Services Society COVID-19 grant and aid application for repairs and upgrades to the roof and flooring of the thrift store. And their request is for in the amount of $24,028.47. You are also supplied with a quote from Bob's Floors that came later. That is also to be included with the roofing quote. Move for discussion. Okay, seconded. Okay. It's your pleasure, council.
I'll break the ice.
Okay, go ahead. Councillor Cole, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Wickstrom. The project description says removing current carpet and replacing it with more sustainable hygienic option. This flooring estimate looks like it's for carpet. I have a few other things to say about the file, but not jumped out at me. Makes sense to have a cleanable floor, but
Yeah, it's that carpet tile, so I guess you can pull out a piece at a time if it gets damaged.
my understanding too, but it's just a bit of a gap in the project description.
Okay. Any other comments? Go ahead. Yep, I'll defer to staff. Does it meet the qualifications of the COVID?
I think it would probably
Thank you. I'll take a chance at answering. The COVID grant and aid funds have been left fairly wide open for council's discretion to use. I know that we have, for lack of better terms, 4 buckets that we've traditionally, given out grant funding from. One of this would have been for vulnerable populations. So under vulnerable populations, considering that the thrift store does, cater to some of those vulnerable populations, we could draw a line there.
You want somebody online, so you have to be on.
And initially, the province set out parameters for the grant. It said it could not be spent on capital. Expanded the scope to 3 capital. Building and retro. Networking.
I did notice on their statement of operations that their balance is, says excess of revenues over expenses is fairly healthy. And I know that we have helped some to do with loss of revenue because of COVID. Go ahead.
So I don't really mind which business aspect of their operation that they want to apply the money to, but I'd like to think that this money ultimately is going to serve their clients. In North Island Community Services clients who are on the economic fringes of our community. And it's not so much about the thrift store, because everybody in town can shop there. It's more about the proceeds from the thrift store that they can use for the programs. So I'm fully in support of that. So as long as we're convinced that this is going to improve the programs in some way, then I would be in favor of it. I just don't see anything in any of the documentation that indicates that. But I'm not against that.
Councillor Downey, go ahead.
I guess I'm looking at I am looking at statement of operations, and they had a significant lift in revenue for program funding, and they lost revenue in their fees. So I guess I'm wondering, with a financial statement like this, why is it coming to us? But aside from that, actually, what I'd like to know more, I think, is what the longevity of that building is. You know, before you pour money in for a roof and flooring. And the fact is that we're looking at, you know, our old school. We're entertaining discussions or going to head into discussions regarding the use of the old school space, and perhaps the thrift store may want to relocate into that space. We have a significant amount of footage there. It wouldn't be immediate, but if we could nail that down sooner, or even have that conversation with the thrift store as to whether that is an option, they may say, no way, we need to be a standalone building, and that's fine. But I do think that perhaps there's a conversation that we could have. So I'd like to motion if we could just table this to our next meeting, and then engage in a conversation as to the future of their building or the longevity of it, and see if there's a room to incorporate the operation within the old school.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Any discussion? Those in favor? Opposed? Okay. We have 5D, donation of logs. We're taken down at the Broughton Strait Campground. So we have 3 donation requests, one from Thomas Simons, one from the Port McNeill Legion, and the Loggers Sports Society. Oh, yeah. Conflict of interest. Sure. Okay. Yeah, you can stand out there. We'll get you. Yep. Mhm. It's a long walk.
Can I make a motion?
Go ahead. Yep.
I'm going to move that we approve all three of these requests.
Okay. Second it. Any discussion on it? Counselor Cole?
Thank you, Mayor Wexler. Perhaps directed to the Public Works or staff. There's been no mention of any cutting on the town property, so I'm just wondering if the intention is would be they're cutting on the town property by non-town employees. Question. Regards to this grant.
So the lumber is, or the logs are all leaving the site and being dealt with elsewhere. Yeah, elsewhere. Yeah.
Thank you. That was my only concern.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Did somebody get Councillor Barron and tell her she can come back in?
We should.
Yeah. Okay, on to item 7A. We've got the waterfront bandstand. I know that our recreation liaison, Councillor Cole, did speak to the proponent, the Gatehouse Theatre, Gord Oppen. And I'll ask if there's anything you wanted to communicate to council.
Apologies, can I get the page number?
It was, sorry, page 33.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Wickstrom. I did meet with the proponent and I was fairly encouraged on the work that's been done so far. Also encouraged to see it on the agenda for a follow-up. We all had time to think about it, I think. Prepared to make a motion to this plan in principle. But I would like to discuss some details of that, whether that's
Enter for that we can discuss. Go ahead, Councillor Cole.
I'd like us to support it in principle and see the final application for approving. We had a similar process for the waterfront playground, and the motion was support in principle. The application never, that was the intent of the motion, didn't go before council. And if we were successful, then we would decide yes or no. And I just think that we need to know what the plan is going in, support it in principle, and assume if we're get the grant, we're going to move ahead or not this business is sort of deciding after.
Just for clarification, I think when we agree in principle, we agree to the project and then the details of where it was, which would be the same for the bandstand would be.
Council, so
Yeah.
we're approving in principle, the application. Just before it goes out, I assume would come to us, maybe there's a few mistakes, something, but we would know where it is, the size of it, you know, cost estimates would be more defined than.
I believe that supporting something in principle that doesn't even have a scale drawing for us to look at, that doesn't have a clearly defined budget and doesn't have a grant approval, you know, they may need our approval in principle in order to get the grant. And I'll go along with that at the proper time, but I don't believe this is the time. We haven't even seen a proper drawing. We've had a sales pitch, but we haven't seen a drawing. We don't even know what sort of footprint it is. In myself personally, I believe that that area is pretty well used as it stands, and cramming more in there requires an awful lot of planning that we need to be involved in before we say we support this in principle. That's a very strong level of support. It means that if they can take that and leverage it into a grant, we're going to be expected to get behind them. Even if we don't agree with their plan anymore. So I don't want to, I'm not going to support it. He came to me, Gord came to my office and talked to me at length about it. And I said, well, if I could see a scale drawing, and I'd be a lot more inclined to consider supporting it without a drawing.
Okay,
May I
Councillor.
respond to that?
Okay.
Could I? That's the intention of my motion is we see the final plan. Like this hasn't happened in the past. So this is improvement on what's happened in the past. The improvement principle, you like the idea or not. And at least he knows. You're expecting him to come up with detailed plans and drawings without knowing council feels about it. Big man deserves the group backed up. We're either for this or not, and then we see the final plan. And if it's columns, we don't like it, then that's our time to say, location, back to drawing board, change our mind.
Okay,
I think that
just a moment. I think that Councillor Barron, did you have to want to say first, and then Councillor Barron?
A couple thoughts. We spent significant time last council meeting discussing planter boxes. And in the essence, at the end of the day, really what we were talking about is what is the land use plan? What is the plan for parks and green spaces and gathering spaces within our community and especially along the waterfront? That being said, this is a grant funding opportunity that is closing immediately. So if an application doesn't go in, it won't go in. The opportunity is lost. I do agree we need a plan. I do agree that there's a lot more at stake here. I personally am willing to support the motion, but this needs to go to the harbor because they're doing work down there and they've got a lot of planning that's going on. So I believe it needs to go to the harbor. Probably should go to the APC as well. And you know, I don't know how vibrant your recreation committee there is Councillor Cole, but definitely there too. So we should support the opportunity this person's brought forward, and we can figure out the details. And I think as long as we're honest with the proponent and we say, look, we've got a lot of things at play here. You may win this funding, but we may decline it for reasons X, Y, and Z. Just to put it out there so that they know what's, you know, it's not a done deal. And I think that would be fair.
Councillor Barron?
Ditto.
Okay. Councillor Mitchell, you wanted to say something?
Well, the only thing that concerns me is that it's too tight. It's locked down to a specific piece of real estate. There's blinders on. All they can see is the waterfront and one portion of the waterfront. And there's lots of other places they haven't considered because they don't feel it meets their criteria. But so agreement in principle says we agree with that as well. I don't.
Councillor Cole, did you have anything to add?
No, other than, yeah, there is no recreation committee. I'm aware of that. That would be better if we had a parks plan and recreation committee. I mean, to be frank, this is the first I heard of this grant. That kind of surprised me too. And that was the problem. One of the problems I had with the waterfront grant is we never had an opportunity as a council to discuss if we're going to go for this grant or not. Maybe we had another project in mind. So here we are again, sort of.
This
But
is
it was never brought to us.
this is through ICE-T. It wasn't really for us to obtain as a grant, is my understanding.
It's for nonprofit. Yeah.
Nonprofit organizations. So that would be why.
And it needs to be public land as well. It can't, go on private property. It has to be public land.
The town couldn't spearhead a project itself. Signatory to it.
Oh, that's a good question. I would have to read all of the
Regardless.
things.
Just putting that out there. Maybe there's an opportunity. passing on in favor of this.
Did you have something to add, Councillor Bear?
So we're agreeing in principle, idea, gathering space, bandstand, area, specific to parcel land, or is it just the idea of it, and if it has to be a park? But if we keep different land between now and the time that they get the okay and everything goes through, it's saying this square footage here and we're stuck with that. Again, in principle, it sounds like a good idea if we could make sure all the pieces together.
Yeah, and I think that ICT is fairly flexible in that regard, and so long as it still meets all the parameters of. The recommendation is that council support the gatehouse plan in principle and discuss location. I would probably add as well, location and scope. If and when the grant application is successful.
I
Sorry.
can support it.
I-
It's not specific to the harbor. There can be more than one possible location.
Well, right now, there's not a motion on the table, so if somebody
Yeah,
would like to make.
there is a
one.
motion.
Oh, there's, I'm
Could
sorry.
we have it read back, please?
Yeah, thanks.
I actually wasn't quite sure with the bits of discussion, but what I had written down was that council supports the Gatehouse Theatre waterfront bandstand proposal in principle, and that it return to council prior to submission, or how would you like to phrase that?
That's exactly my motion. Thank you. And I feel that gives us a safeguard. We're going to see the application. If between now and then, if somebody's got a better idea for the spot and suggest that to the proponent and they change their plan. Plan was, like, if you want a detailed plan, you got to know where it is. He can't get cost estimates on some plan that could be in 5 different spots around town. So
Staff?
Thank you, Mayor Wickstrom. Just for clarity for Councillor Cole, as we could request to see the grant application. However, it's not one being put out through the town of Port McNeill. It's being done through the Gatehouse Theatre as a society outside of us. They are only asking for our support in principle. So although we can make the request, we could you know, withhold our agreement in principle contingent on them sharing the application, but we can't force them to show us the application. It's not our application, it's theirs.
Sorry, if it closes soon, there time for that much. They even have X that could be
You have, yep.
thank you, Mayor, to Councillor Barron. My understanding is there's not a particular rush. He's not feeling really rushed. So I think at the time to do this right, I think we could just change the wording of the motion to, yeah, we support it in principle pending seeing the application. If they don't want to give us the application, they're not going to have the final letter that says we support it.
Yeah, and I actually was just in an ICT meeting, and there isn't a closing date, but there is a set amount of money. And as because it doesn't go through the process of approval with the individual groups or boards, it's a not a one-off, but they just go through ICT and their staff. It doesn't go through us. So yeah, there could be a run on it or not.
So the pot's not dry yet.
No, not yet. Okay. Sorry, can you just read out that motion one more time, please? Apologies.
Yes, Your Worship. The motion was that council supports the Gatehouse Theatre waterfront bandstand proposal in principle and that it return to council prior to submission.
Get add one word in there. Council supports the Gatehouse application. That word in there. So we support their application in principle, but it's going to come back to us.
Councillor Downey.
To Councillor Barron, has anything been brought forward to the Harbor Advisory Group regarding this?
All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Okay, next we have, sorry,
Perhaps a motion to, do you want the harbor committee to look at it, or we'll just trust, maybe you could trust me to ask the proponent to run it by the harbor committee? So,
The intention is just that the Harbor gets it.
sure.
for input, yeah. Okay. Item 7B, development permits, variance permit application 1762 for any place. So this is to address the removing of a deck due to structural deficiencies and installing a perimeter drain. And and now they just want to put the deck back in the same location that it was. So the recommendation, well, there's three options. One is that we approve. And then the other two in the back. Issue that council may deny or postpone consideration of the DVP. Go ahead, Councillor Downey.
You know, my apologies, but I do wonder if Public Works has any concerns regarding this application.
Public Works is here. I don't know if you're prepared to answer that question.
Can you all hear me?
Mhm.
Yeah, I have looked through this, not in a fantastic amount of detail, but it's fairly cut and dried. I don't think that we have a concern as far as Public Works is concerned.
So access to services there that is a flag in any shape or form.
No, there's no conflict from what I see.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Mayor Wickstrom. A question for probably staff in general. Do we actually have a fence height bylaw? So even though this deck is there, there could be a 12-foot fence in front of it blocking visibility? Is that normal that there's no fence height? But like, I wonder, we just went through our whole zoning and everything, and it never came up.
So if I can remind you, we're actually talking about a development variance permit and not the fence, a fence height. So I don't know how that's applicable to the development variance permit.
I think it was applicable the way they described it, but fair enough. I guess my other question is specifically like, wasn't too clear on the drawings, but is the new deck the exact same size as the old deck?
The proponent is here, can answer that question if they would feel inclined to do so. Is the deck the same size as the deck that was removed? I believe it is, but
Can you hear me, Councillor Cole? The deck is almost exactly the same size, plus or minus about 20 centimeters in a couple of directions at the corner.
Motion that we approve the variance.
okay, seconder for that motion. Any comments, any further discussion?
I'm curious about the requirements for building permits for the work that's been done and why this wasn't brought to us a little earlier in the game.
So again, I'll just remind that we're talking about a development variance permit and not building permits. And they will need a building permit to do this deck. Okay, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. Next, we have item 7C, And that is the report to council for Public Works. Public Works Manager is here. But if there's no question, receive and file. Any seconder for that? All
I
those-
did have a question
Yep.
about the beach drives.
Yep.
Just curious how it's coming. Yeah, I had my visit a few weeks ago to get the easement arranged. How is it? Could you tell us how it's coming along?
This is the phase 3 of the landslide mitigation we're discussing. And yeah, as I put in the report there, we are very deeply involved in the legal aspect of the entire project right now, which is securing statutory right-of-way in the backyards of basically 40 properties which are affected along the bank above Beach Drive. And that's where the drainage works is proposed to go. The design is all done. It's all completed. As I say, there's a ton of front-end work on this kind of project. And at the moment, we're just securing those SRWs, getting all the legal aspect of it in place in tandem with basically we're building the tender document, which is going to be the actual works. So hopefully there won't be too much of a delay between the finishing of the legal aspect and securing those SRWs, and then actually putting out for tender to the contractors the actual work, and then getting the work started. We're anticipating early summer. Actually, it'll probably be, we're aiming for July for that, for the works to start. It's going to be a lengthy process with, council's approval. You've seen me pitch phase 1 and phase 2 already, and this is phase 3. Phase 2 was a really good, it was a great platform to see how the contractors worked, how they interacted with, the residents. It was about 1/10 of this scale. However, it was a really good exercise, and and seeing how the town actually, worked and appreciated the work that was done and how we were satisfied with the end product. It was awesome. So we've done the dry run, so to speak, which was a success. And I have utmost confidence that we're going to manage a really good, successful project this year.
I did have a question actually that I meant to ask. The active transportation plan for Hemlock Street. It says the design is being modified after meeting with councillors Cole and Mitchell, and I know that they were going to meet, but it didn't come back as to council. So how is it being modified?
Okay, first of all, Mayor Wickstrom, I apologize for that. I should have had more detail after that. We did meet at the site, and basically there were a couple of modifications. This was a recommendation after a preceding council meeting, and we did meet. It was just minor adjustments basically to the idea of a separate bike lane. And at the end of the day, the design has not been it's not deviated too greatly. It's just a little bit more asphalt or paving, as opposed to more boulevard space, if you will, between the sidewalk and the actual road itself.
Thank you. All right, any further questions? All those in favor of receipt? Opposed? It's carried. Next, we've got our report to council, which is our harbor report.
Receive and file.
Okay. All those, did you have a question to do with it?
I did.
Yep,
Thank
go
you, Mayor
ahead.
Wickstrom. The first page of the report, number 3, harbor shower upgrade. I believe we made a motion to call that bathroom/shower. But that's not, it just popped in my head now, but it says under 2, expecting completion date after results of survey are released. So then we're talking land survey or the hazard assessment survey or is a paper survey going out. And Harbor's not here, but that's Public Works to speak to that. I assume we're talking hazard assessment. Page 67.
Bullet 3 alludes to the hazard assessment.
I apologize there, Councillor Cole. Can you clarify where are we at?
Yeah, we're at the harbor shower upgrade. And it's probably just words, but number 2 says expected completion date will be updated after results of a survey are released. So does that mean a land survey? We're doing some sort of survey of
No.
the harbor users, or would that be?
It was, I'm quite sure that that's referring to the hazard assessment, which has been done, and I'm just waiting on a report for that. That was the hazardous materials, basically, that we were going to assess, like, you know, how that would impact the actual dismantling of the building, if that was going to be the case.
And just one final question for staff. This is still a harbor bathroom shower upgrade project. We did make a motion to change the title of it. I think we're pretty serious when we said we want bathrooms there, but
Yeah, I
it's
did.
coming back as shower.
I did remember, yeah, that we had asked for 2 showers and a washroom or something like that. Do you know if that's coming back to us at all, or?
I'm unaware. Questions like this would have been great to pose to our harbor manager prior to the meeting, so we could have had a substantial answer for you at the meeting.
Fair enough, I guess. If you check back in our motions, we made a motion to call this project harbor shower / bathroom. I am indeed correct. It'd be nice to see it labeled as such.
Councillor Mitchell?
Could I just ask the question, what is the plan here? We have a drawing that says 2 bathrooms, 2 showers, 1 bathroom, 1 shower.
Not
What do
yet.
we have?
Not yet. Rebecca hasn't come back to us. Or sorry, our harbor manager has not come back to us yet.
So is it going to come to council for approval before it gets built?
Building. Any further. I really don't. Transfer.
Also, they don't know how much land is available.
I don't need them. Exactly.
And if I remember correctly, I believe we have a motion. We did make a motion for the plans to come back, so they will come back to us at that time. And staff is nodding, so before anything else is replaced, the plans will come to us.
And if I may, I do recall the discussion being about modular units. So if we're planning that, it's conceivable that we could see something. What's being looked at. We know the footprint if the building's disappearing.
Shouldn't be too hard to figure out how much land you have, right? Take
Okay.
it here.
Okay, all those in favor of receipt? Opposed, carried. Next, we have our fire department report. Straightforward. Receive and file. Seconder. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed, carried. Next, we have our economic development manager's report. Did notice, I believe, behind Connor, our economic development manager is there if you have any questions. Seconder. Great. Discussion? Those in favor? Opposed, carried. Next, we've got item G. Let's get to the page here. We have, sorry, Tourism Commission's recommendation for a member. And that name is Trudy Lacasse. with Sun Fun Divers.
I move that we accept her as a member of the Tourism Commission.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to our checklisting for February 20th, 2022. And if you're like me, you notice that some people got paid twice before I realized that it's actual a double of report in there. So in case any questions arise out of that. But we do have our CFO here if you had any questions, otherwise receive and file. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, moving on to our official community plan. So you have the cleaned up copy before you. Looking for that council give the official community plan bylaw 704 2021 third reading. Go ahead, Councillor Cole.
Is the intention to just do third reading today?
Once we did third reading, if third reading passes, I will ask if there is an appetite for council to do the fourth and final reading.
Thank you. May I continue?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, the maps got straightened out. That's great. I did notice a little late in the game, apologies, but they're missing water courses, creeks are not identified on the maps. And there could be arguments made pro or against, but you know, a quick survey of other official community plans, they definitely show the creeks. I think creeks, streams, etc., are very important with regards to developments. There's restrictions to develop around those areas. You know, we've got a creek here, we've got a creek running through our own property below the regional district there. It runs through development property is slated to be C2. The CD1 Beach Camp Hoy Bay area's got at least 4 S1 or S2 classified salmon streams. Yeah, I think that's something we missed, and there would be time to add that for fourth reading. That'd be great.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I would be willing to support third reading. I would like to have a chance to read through it a little bit more of the material. It was quite a bit of stuff to read this week. I didn't get through the whole thing. Support the third reading, but
Is it considered a living document?
Amendments can be made, but yes, is that correct? Sealed and signed.
Correct. Thank you, Mayor Wickstrom. It is a bylaw that we are writing, so any changes would be considered amendments and would need to go through the same process that we did to adopt this if it does get adopted. So that would include public hearings and first, second, third readings for amendments. That's correct.
We would have to amend the document to get those added in.
And also if we make a decision as a council, then we are to stay at second reading in order to be able to do that, correct?
Correct. There can be no changes made after third reading.
not in favor of it.
That's correct. Local government bylaws, policies can't supersede provincial or federal. That's correct. I don't have an estimate.
Councillor Coley, you were going to make a comment?
Uh,
Or did I miss
No,
that?
no.
Okay. All right. So I'll call the question. All those in favor of third reading? Opposed? It's carried. So I will ask then, that council give the official community plan bylaw 704, 2021, fourth and final reading for adoption. Okay. Favor? Opposed? It's carried. Okay, next we've got item 9A, fishing float. This was requested to find out what the cost of a fishing float would be. It was also discussed by Harbor Advisory Group, the possible locations and their input as well. And then a suggestion, I don't know, Councillor Barron, since you were on the Harbor Committee, did you want to add anything here or basically as the report reads? Any comments on the report or?
Okay, what page is that report?
It's on page 163. After all the maps on the OCP, you got to go through the whole official community plan, and then there's a couple last reports sitting there. Go ahead, Councillor Downey.
I just want to note here that the Harbor Advisory discussed the fishing float, possible locations, and the collective decision of the Harbor Advisory Group that due to currents, tides, weather conditions, and vessel traffic, there is not a suitable location for a floating dock for recreational fishing in the harbor. I guess my question would be, or what I wonder, is that could one be there on a seasonal basis, or there is no good season to put one out there?
Understanding. Down there. In the time it would be summer season, spring.
It was interesting that the pier idea came, and I
love
remember
that idea.
Helen Scott has brought that idea to us many a
Love
time
that
to
idea.
have for fishing or any other small wedding, whatever. I always, yeah, I always feel like it's a project that it would be great to do,
So-
not in memoriam, but
I'm
well,
going to
she
make
would
a
be allowed
motion
to
that we
feed.
set funds aside to do this project. And build a fishing float, and put it out there, because of course there's a place to put it. It's a matter of having the will to do it. It's that simple.
So that's,
What professional turned it down? So I'm going to make the motion that we allocate the funds to put a fishing float out there.
seconder for that motion?
I'll second for discussion.
Okay.
But an engineering report says there's no possible way to put a fishing float in our marina. Asking, I don't know who made this decision. I don't agree with them.
Councillor Cole?
Council Mitchell, I'll be voting against this. I think the appropriate time for a discussion like this, it will be our next budget meeting when we're doing our quote unquote wish list. That's why I think the appropriate time for this. We just did strategic planning. I've never seen this sort of final list, but something like this jumps ahead of.
This one's been on my radar since I got elected to council, and I know that there's an appropriate place for it. Here's a report. I disagree with the report. I'm going to put a motion. If council wants to vote against it, but you seconded it so I could talk.
Yep.
If council wants to vote against it, I'm extremely disappointed that tunnel vision, we turn it over to a committee, a non-elected committee, to make the decision for us without any professional guidance at all. I struggle with that. I know darn well there's a place for a float out there. And I don't accept that response.
They're very excited because they feel breakwater. Actually, sure, feasible. But it is. But we would like it. Disagree necessarily saying right to the spot. Hazards that come with that, but that vision would
Yep. Well, if we're in a coastal community and our children deserve a place where they can go and safely fish, we can provide it. And I think I'm going to call it a day.
Okay, I'll call the question. Sorry,
There is a motion.
yeah, there's a motion on the floor. And can you repeat the motion, please? Before we vote?
To your worship, the funds be allocated to build a fishing float.
And just before I call the question, I just want to say I'm in favor of a place for kids to fish. And I'm in favor of putting some money aside. I just will be voting against this because I don't want to peg it on one thing, but I think that we can have something, Councillor Mitchell, that will see children on the dock, or not on the dock, see children fishing. It just might not look like a fishing float. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is defeated.
I was in favor of that.
Can I just note or make a comment that this is a discussion that is happening at our budget meeting. So I'd like to see this document sent to the budget meeting as well and become part of our budget package, whether it's a fishing float or a pier, whichever the case may be, but let's bring it to that meeting, please. That's a motion.
Okay, I'll second that motion, actually.
I-
Any
I
discussion on that?
do believe that's already on the list.
Yeah,
That's kind
I
of
think
why.
it hasn't been
don't-
crossed off on the list, but yeah.
This was getting our price estimate is what we were looking for. The budget was a number.
All those in favor of bringing this report to the budget meetings? Opposed? That's carried. Next, we have spring cleanup, a report from myself. I know that's something that we've talked about a lot, and we always hear when we go to make a decision that it's too late. So I thought it's March, and I'll put it out. Should we consider a spring cleanup for this year? And if so, just looking that council consider a motion to ask staff to report back on how it can be done and what timing would work best for them. Go ahead, Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Mayor Wickstrom. I'm just wondering what spring cleanup means. Does that mean the old furniture out of my basement, or yard waste, or garbage, drywall? Yeah.
Yeah, well, there would have to be some parameters put around that. And, you know, it would be probably larger items that people can't take to the dump. That's generally what, actually, in a lot of communities, what they do is they put those items a few days before, and lots of people will go around and pick them up and repurpose them and whatnot. But yeah, there would have to be a list of acceptable items. And my thought would be they would be larger items. Yes.
May I continue? And in the past, I believe we supplied bins for a third party Rotary or something has done this in the past.
Rotary did it last year.
Yeah.
Rotary was the one who was doing a spring cleanup. The town did pay for the bin and the dumping fees, tipping fees on the bin. Rotarians went around and gathered stuff from the back roads, the by roads, and from those who called and said, I have X, Y, and Z, and I need somebody to help me get it out of my, front yard. And that was done. So when we first moved to Port McNeil, Public Works did exactly what Mayor Wickstrom was saying is, there was a week, it was called spring cleanup. And it was a week, you put your stuff at the top of your driveway, and town Public Works went around with a trailer or a dump truck, and they just threw it all in there. And they just made a pass on each street for, I think it was over a period of a week. So, and then it cleaned up people's yards. So instead of an old fridge sitting in somebody's porch, it got removed completely. So a couple of ways. I don't know what Rotary's plans are for the spring. Certainly could ask them or other clubs if they want to get involved.
And I just put it here for consideration. I mean, we've talked about it before. We talked about a fall cleanup, and each time we talk about it a little too late. So just putting it out there to see if there was any appetite. Go ahead.
I think I would support a spring cleanup of yard waste, but not bridges and stuff. I think our public works crew is busy enough. It creates a bunch of hazards, lifting hazards, safety hazards. If there's a pile of drywall there and it has asbestos in it, like who's cleaning it up? But I think it's sort of fraught with problems maybe, but a spring cleanup of yard waste, but is that even needed? We have
We have a yard
a
bin.
Have a
bin
bunker.
for all that as well. And the spring cleanup of yard waste really helps with our problems with Beach Drive, everyone just years of throwing stuff in a pile and it ends up turning into soil. So
I'm fine if there's, just put it out there because we talked about it. If there's no motion, then receive and file. Okay.
I would like to motion that if Public Works could report back to council as to if a spring cleanup would be possible given the parameters and the jobs that their department is working on right now. It just logistics may not warrant it. That's not my long-winded motion, but so motion that Public Works report back to council if this is feasible or not. And if it's feasible, what types of material would or should or could be picked up.
Seconder for that motion. Okay, any further discussion? Favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, and next we have our recommendations from the March 17th Committee of the Whole meeting. It's various ways. Sometimes you go through one by one or as a group. What we're looking for is that the recommendations from the March 17th Committee of the Whole be adopted as resolutions. The block. Seconder for that motion.
second for discussion on one
Okay.
item.
Go ahead.
On the second page, 3/20/22. Carry that Hoy Bay development project be moved from the nice to-do list of priorities to the must-do list of priorities. If somebody's sitting on the sidelines, it sounds like something's happening there. And nothing's happening. I think the intention was money was put aside for like a survey. So I'm not really too keen on those words. Just wanted to point that out. I'm not going to bother with a motion, but it certainly sounds like we're moving ahead with, and most people, when you say development, they means houses and buildings. My version of development there, might be a trail, and that's still development. So, it's open-ended that way, but it certainly leads one to believe moving ahead with a project at there, and it's top of our priorities.
Well, just to further on that, I think what you actually said is rather than project, that word should be changed to survey because that was the intent, is to have it, that money set aside, it be surveyed, and it would be basically setting the next council up to say, this is what Hoy Bay has. These are the pitfalls. These are the pros and the cons, and now you can move forward. I think, would you be, if we change that to survey instead of project?
I think that would be great.
Comfortable? Okay. Who, that
I'll,
was,
I'll
yeah, okay, yeah, second that amendment, great, okay. All right, so with that amendment then, all those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Council reports, but does anybody have anything verbal that they'd like to bring forward? Okay, seeing none, there are no items from in camera to be made public, but I do need a motion to go in camera under section 91A, labor relations, information that's prohibited under section 21 of the Freedom of Information Act, and K, negotiations related to discussions of a municipal service. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed, carried. Are there any questions from the public? And there is someone online. Bill, do you have any questions for us? Are you nothing here? Okay, great. So a motion to adjourn and go in camera, please. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Opposed?